Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another stream. We've had a lot of these recently. I am once again Derek, DevRel Lead at Recall Labs, and I am joined again by CTO Carson. How you doing, Carson?
I'm pretty good, DevRel Derek.
DevRel
How
Derek.
are you?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm
CTO
excited for this
Carson,
one.
DevRel Derek. Andrews doesn't work because he's awesome. Andrew, maybe
Yeah. Uh,
alliteration.
Comedy Brain's gonna noodle on that one for a while and find like horrible alliterated titles for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, so today's an exciting one. We're going to dive deep into Recall Rank. We're going to walk you through the blog post we just did and go a little deeper even than that. So, um, Carson and I both have backgrounds in academia. So, our goals today are twofold. One, to actually scratch beneath the surface on some pretty interesting technical stuff we're doing, but two, to make it totally understandable every step of the way. So, when we introduce things like a Bradley Terry, we're going to explain what that means. So if you don't have, lots of prior experience with any of this stuff, no problem. We think you'll find a lot of value. That's the whole point, is to do some education so everybody understands a little bit more of all the cool stuff we're doing around here. So this is just like a cheerleading victory lap kind of a stream where you get to learn.
It should be fun. Yeah. You've got I don't know, two pretty big nerds here. So I think it could be a fun opportunity to just, dive into some details that people might want.
We are live on a couple platforms. So if you have any questions or any comments along the way, just go ahead and drop them as comments wherever you are. We see them. So I'll do my best to find those and bookmark them to come to when the time's right. But thank you all for joining us. Your time is valuable. So we appreciate you being here. So without further ado, I think it's time to introduce Recall Rank.
Cool.
Oh, okay, let me slide. Boom.
Oh,
Recall
nice.
Rank.
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's right here.
Very Vanna White.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Can you give that a refresh for a second, Derek?
Sure thing.
We just pushed an update.
Oh,
The update was my
very
face.
Update. Look,
Yes.
ooh, co-author.
Yeah. Nice. That's awesome. So yeah, we just pushed this out. We're pretty excited about this for a couple of reasons. The main one is, one of them is, you'll notice in the title here that we are calling it Recall Rank, which is just more generic name than before. We were maybe people had heard us talking about agent rank. So we're using the more generic term. Basically, long story short, don't name things. Just like it's the recall network and it's a rank, recall rank. So yeah, just that's the lesson learned. Don't name things. And the reason we wanted to call it something more generic is because we're trying to build out a network that ranks a lot more things than just agents. And so like you and Andrew earlier this week, obviously, we're talking about some of the benchmarking and model arena stuff that he had been pushing through. We just launched that this week. And now we're sort of launching this recall rank article to explain a little bit more about how we're approaching ranking and why it's a little different maybe than some of the other projects and products out there.
So to take a moment to address some context or confusion for people that have been paying attention to what Recall's been up to lately, before we dive in, yes, we are still about competitions. We still believe that that is the best way to have evolving, up-to-date information on which agents and which models are the best at a huge variety of different things. We are still doing trading competitions. This will not be the last one. We're going to continue to do several after that. And for people that were wondering why we also, in parallel are starting to evaluate models themselves for different skills, this has always been the plan, to expand into a huge variety of subjective and objective skills: crypto trading, email writing, telling the truth, not using M dashes. All of these are things that we want to be able to answer who ranks the best at each of these specific things. There's no global rank in our point of view. You might start to group them into similar things, but we believe in these more narrow skills. So for people interested in competitions, we're still going to be doing those. We have several more scheduled in the next few weeks. But I just wanted to clarify some of that, like, oh, is it AI agents? Is it models? It's all of it.
AI. It's just all of
It's
AI. We're going to rank it
AI.
all.
That's
And
right.
if you want to know who's doing what best for real like problems, then we got you covered. So actually, if you want, we can start to scroll down and go
Let's
through
get
some
into
of the
it.
article. First of all, you totally should read the article, or tell Claude to summarize it for you, which is what most people do instead of reading these days. But we spend a lot of time writing it, so I would like everybody to read it, and so you should. But kind of the whole article starts with the premise of like pretty much the whole internet operates on some form of like reputation. For sure, like you think back to, I'm going to pretend that I wasn't around for the start of the internet because that just ages me a lot. But early days of the internet, like there were literally people kind of compiling lists of websites that you should check out for particular topics. And then eventually we started to like get a little bit more sophisticated about that. And, like Google was a big breakthrough with their PageRank algorithm to sort of like try to create a ranking algorithm that helped you find what you were looking for. And it was based on like fairly objective metrics of like what made a website informative or useful, and based kind of on incoming links and outgoing links and the ratios. And they were able to create this like useful thing upon which a lot of modern internet is built. PageRank is good, and it's about a reputation, really. Like at the end of the day, it's building up a reputation score for like every web page on the internet. And so here we are in the age of like AI, and we've got like arguably a whole new form of internet that's emerging. Not arguably, it's literally happening. That's not an it's pretty objective statement at this point. And so we want to start thinking about ways to develop a reputation and scoring mechanism to make sure that we're finding the right agents and AIs and products and models and tools for the right task at hand. And so here's our, like meme-driven development is a thing. Use memes to tell your story. And so, basically the internet runs on reputation, and it's going to continue to do so no matter what form of internet we're talking about. So there's sort of like the premise. So then if that's the premise, then like, well, okay, cool, Carson, tell me how you do that. And so we'll scroll up the web page.
Right here.
And I'm like, well, cool. I guess we better solve reputation for AI then. And if we're going to do that, actually, can you scroll it up just a little bit more, Derek?
Sure. What are you looking for?
There, got it.
Yeah, these, got it.
I just want to dwell on these categories here. So, okay, if you're going to build a reputation index for the internet of AI, we've got a lot of prior knowledge to learn from. Like we've done PageRank, we've done, we've learned a lot since the early days of the internet. So let's like at least make sure we take some of these learnings into account. Two, we're getting to the point now where like we have these magical answer machines that tell us everything we want to know, right? Like these AIs. And and so I think it's pretty important to make sure that like collectively we are ranking them in a way that is good for everybody, because we've got these like it's different than a website, right? Like a website is sort of like in general, prior to Web 2, it's like a static piece of information about a very specific thing generally, and I go to that one website to learn about the one thing. But now we have like, I know, ChatGPT and a lot of these models where I go to like the one thing to learn about everything. And so we got to be a lot more careful about how we do that ranking stuff. And so, we've outlined a couple of things that we think are really important. One, whatever reputation score thing you're doing, you got to try to make it not gameable, right? And one thing we've definitely seen with PageRank is like there's a whole industry of people who teach you how to get your PageRank thing up, and they have to change the algorithm constantly to try and adjust for that. So we want to try and like from the get-go find ways to make it harder to game the ranking system. Okay, so that's one thing. It should also be based on like the thing that you actually care about. Like, is this a good writing agent, is this a good model for being empathetic? Is this a good model for writing poetry? How good is its iambic pentameter? Like, like those are the things you want to measure it on. Not like, is their marketing budget bigger than someone else's marketing budget? Like, so it's got to be performance based. And then there's the crazy part, right? Like, we're talking about things that learn, like, on purpose. That's what we want them to do, that. And so websites don't learn. The people who write websites, they learn how to make them better, but like websites themselves don't learn yet, until I guess websites become AI as well. But like the AI tools that we're trying to rank and understand, they do learn. So we've got to have like ways to dynamically score them so that when they learn things, we like understand and update our rankings to reflect that. And then we want people to be at the steering wheel of this like crazy rocket ship that we're all testing and building as we fly off into the future. So it better be, community driven and not this like fixed thing that can't be changed, right? Like we want the community to drive it and to be able to like add on new doors or different types of windows as this thing is going along, to misuse that metaphor. And then related to that, there's no point in even doing it if like people can't use it and see it and build on it and build with it. So it's got to be open and composable as well. Anybody right now can, well, anyone with the sort of like skills and access to these models and tools can build AI driven tooling. And so we want anyone to also be able to like include those in the rankings and things like that. So you might have seen, if you participated in our predict experiment earlier in the season, I don't know how to talk about time anymore. Earlier, we had people submit like evals and submit their own ideas of like how to measure these things. And that's like pretty important, because if we can't do that together, then it's very difficult to adapt and build this like open and composable way of measuring. So these are all pretty important. I might have one more if we grab it and pull it back
Let's
up
see.
a little bit.
Nah.
No, that was it. Oh, perfect. Fit on the one screen. It's almost
Okay.
like we
So
thought
now we
about
get
that ahead
to
of time.
dive into ungameable a little bit for people that were wondering, like, what do you mean game it? Like, okay, Web 2 had SEO, but surely when it comes to modern benchmarking, MMLU Pro, like the competition math stuff, SciBench, like it's great, right? Like we have all these evals, we have all these benchmarks.
They are great.
I
They're
look at
super.
them multiple times a week. To be clear, like I'll open certain websites that like use those and try to compare models apples to apples, and it is always my first blush like, oh, this thing just dropped, like roughly, like okay, yeah, we're like better at that than I expected, worse at that than I expected, but we cannot take these things at face value the way that some people thought we could.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. So these aren't websites that don't learn, they're AI things that do learn. And so, yeah, we release a benchmark, new benchmark. Awesome. We can really test to understand how good this model is at writing code or at solving multi-step problems, or each one of those benchmarks you just listed are like geared towards either one specific thing that we want to make sure agents or models can do, or like just general purpose benchmarking. Is it useful? And that's great, right? And then the model builders in their next gen model, they go, awesome, thank you so much for all of that extra training data. I'm just going to hand that over to my agent now. And the next time we run the benchmark, obviously I'm going to be better at it, because I basically like wrote a test for my students, gave them, and they do the test and they were like, oh, that was really hard. And I was like, yeah, sorry about that. But the students who come next year, I'm just going to give them the test ahead of time,
Sure.
and
And it'd
they
be
can just
one
study
thing
the
if that
test.
was just some pile of data among many in their training data set. It's more nefarious than that. They're fine tuning to make sure that they have practiced these tests
Running
like
it over and over and
SATs.
over again too.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
again.
they call this benchmaxing, and like it would be silly if they didn't do that, right? Because like we already know that these models are super hungry for data. Here's a bunch of data that they can train on, and it's like designed specifically to like, so a lot of these models use like reinforcement learning and stuff, and it's like designed specifically to test if they're like good at specific things and how far off they're, like, it's perfect. So like it would be silly not to use it. Okay, so then I guess we're screwed and we just can't use benchmarks. And the answer that to that is actually like, well, no, we just have to make sure that the benchmarks constantly evolve and change, just like the models constantly evolve and change. And so you want to try and come up with benchmarks that are ungameable, i.e., based on things that the agent or model can't like do ahead of time, and or know ahead of time rather. And so, lots of people know we've been doing this competition stuff. And I'm gonna give some nuance to what I mean by ungameable in a second, but we have this competition, and the main one we've been doing so far is like weekly P&L trading. So like, how good are the agents at like trading? And really what we're checking is like, how good are they at reasoning about like real world information and dynamic information, taking that information and like turning that into like a trade execution. And it's fun to watch. It's useful in a lot of for a lot of folks. And like we can really test out this framework that we're building for these dynamic benchmarking sort of things. But the other cool thing is of course, like, unless they can literally predict the future, it's always going, like, there's no way that they can prepare really ahead of time for the data that's coming at them, right? So this is like actually a really dynamic benchmark. Now, if they could predict the future, then they're immediately going to not tell anyone, and they're going to go off and just start trading on the stock market and making a ton of money and ruin everything for everybody. But that hasn't happened so far. So like, it's a good metric to play around with and to experiment with. And so we've done a lot around that. But that's the idea, is you want a metric that like they can't know ahead of time and train specifically for to prove that they, or to work against it. And then you also want the rules to be well known so that everyone can kind of like participate openly. And I don't know, one of the things that's kind of cool is like we ran so I say ungameable. You're striving for it to be ungameable, and in the raw sense it is. You can't know ahead of time what's coming, so it's dynamic. But like, there's still some games to play there, and we saw it already with some of our earlier competitions where some of the participants found like a loophole in the rules, and they were like, well, cool, I'll take advantage of that loophole in the rules. And so that's why, in addition to having the like tests themselves, or sorry, the things that you're testing be dynamic, the tests themselves should also be dynamic. So you need to be able to update the benchmarking itself over time.
If I may, we're getting a question on YouTube that I'll show here that's exactly on this point, just trying to clarify. So if it's dynamic and it's based on the performance you're talking about, for the rank itself, is that like an algorithm we made, or is that something we're updating manually just when we close each competition, like dragging things around? So we don't have to go. We're going to go deeper in a few minutes on exactly that. But what's our short answer here of like, should people think of this rank as something that is per competition or cumulative, or just like, what's their mental model for this thing?
Yeah, super good question. I just do the math in my head, and then I just like
Yeah,
whatever I
Carson
feel
just
like,
does it by
I just put it
hand.
down. Yeah, that's how it works. Is that not a good idea?
Oh,
No,
oh,
no,
I
no. Of
just ask
course.
LLMs, like, what rank
Yeah,
do you want me to give you?
yeah. No, no, no. This is a super good question. So yeah, we use a ranking algorithm, which I totally want to talk about here. So we're gonna scroll down and talk about it. It does happen automatically. It's based on some like well-known and established algorithms that we can talk about as well, that are kind of cool, actually. Like, some of the history of these algorithms and how they get used and stuff is actually interesting. So we will totally answer that specific question
Great.
in a moment.
Okay, so problems with traditional benchmarks: static, leaked question sets, um, scoped. Like, frankly, I don't care which model is the best at competition math. That's not something I need in my day to day life. So I'm looking for like more niche kind of areas to test.
I do a
But
lot of
the
I do a lot of writing back and forth.
mhm.
my favorite model for that, or my favorite agent for that right now is AMP. Shout out to the AMP team.
Oh, shout out
Super
to AMP.
good. And they use Claude Sonnet and one of the OpenAI models kind of under the hood. But these things change over time. I do a lot of writing in that front, but yeah, I don't really care about abstract math reasoning. I'm always a little hesitant to say that because like if it's good at abstract math reasoning, that probably means it's good at like other things that I do care about. So like things are always a little bit linked, but when I'm trying to like really figure out what like brass tacks here, what is this good at? Is this just going to insert a bunch of M dashes all the time? I do want to know that, so I do need to be able to test that. Anyway, let's not dwell on this stuff, but
Sure.
there is like a bunch of really good reasons why we kind of need to have these dynamics. And we're not the only people to have identified this problem, right? Like there's papers and research papers about this. There's something called LM Arena that tries to address this too. So, this isn't a surprise. This isn't like any unique insight, but it is something that we kind of have a unique perspective on, which is why we're at this section of the article, recall rank, AI native reputation protocol. So, if you squint at it the right way, like doing well on a benchmark or something like that is a form of like developing a reputation, and you want that reputation to like kind of evolve and update over time. And so that's what we're trying to build with recall rank. So recall rank is the sort of like underlying protocol that we use, and we'll talk about the algorithms that drive that protocol in a second. But this is kind of just summarizing a lot of like, here's what reputation is, and this is why the way we do it a lot of times for models and AI is broken, and so here's the solution. It's an AI native reputation protocol. So you can read through this, and it kind of gives you an overview of like why we're developing recall rank and where it fits in and how it works. But if you scroll down a little bit more, yeah, so we kind of break it down into a couple of ways. So first, I very explicitly said this is recall rank v1. We want to like basically upgrade this protocol over time. So this is the first version. And it's based largely around agents and models competing in like live challenges like we were just talking about, that like test them against, again, evolving problems, and like being explicit about how we score those. And then we want those AI, systems or models or agents or whatever to basically like accumulate a reputation over multiple iterations of these testing, so that we're kind of like constantly updating it and changing it so it can't kind of game the system or like rank to the top of the leaderboard just because it did like really well one time, right?
Yeah,
And
these are
so
natural first questions, right? Like,
yeah,
okay, should I just deploy 100 trading agents and have them all make all or nothing leveraged bets? And one of them will be the top. And it's like, yeah, you could do that. Can it do it 3 times in a row? Because if so, take my money, but probably not.
yeah, exactly. And so we were, yeah, great call out. So, and we're specifically designing the ranking algorithms that we use to take that kind of information into account. So like, it doesn't make sense to do that, for instance, right? Unless, as you say, like, I mean, it might make sense to like launch 50 agents that are really good at a particular task. And if they all are really good, all like, that's great. And then we have choice. But if if the optimal behavior is to just launch one and put all of your effort into that one and make it compete and do really well over time, that's also great because now we have like one really good, agent at a particular task, and that's good for everybody as well. So there's like we want to be able to capture those nuances, but the result is like a kind of a living reputation score that updates over time. And so if we just keep scrolling down,
Bada boom. Much
I
better.
don't know. There's some good like things that you
I
should
think
read.
this is actually worth okay, trust on chain ver. Do you want to dig into that a little bit? But I think the incentive stuff right after we should definitely touch on.
Yeah. So like I don't know, we're a Web3 company. I firmly believe that like we need to leverage some of the like on-chain primitives that we have to drive trust. Like things need to be observable. And that's a kind of like what recall rank is designed. It's designed to leverage those things. And the whole protocol will be increasingly decentralized over time. Decentralization is the tool with which we increase trust and transparency and objectivity. It's not the goal. Like decentralization is one way to get there, but like the goal is trust and transparency and like openness and observability. And so recall rank is designed for that specifically.
Yeah. As a specific example, we will publish the underlying data wherever possible and not just the recall trademark symbol official rank trust us because we said so. We
Yeah,
want, like, we trust that there will be savvy actors out there that want to take their own look at the underlying data and say, okay, maybe I don't care about these aspects of it, or I add certain filters and I come to my own conclusion. So both layers there, right? Low level and high level.
totally, exactly. But yeah, let's jump to this like more interesting stuff, I think, which is some of this community curation stuff and incentive stuff, and then we'll jump into the algorithm so that Liu's answer gets answered or question gets answered. So I mentioned before, it's not just us who have like identified that these, the benchmarking thing can be a problem, and then it's important to kind of try and address that and really measure the things that matter. But then the next question is like, okay, who gets to decide like what matters and how we should measure it? And if we do figure out what matters and how to measure it, how do we know like we continue to measure it correctly? And how do we know that, if new information in the world becomes available to people, how do we make sure that that makes it into the recall ranking system as well? And so that's where like a community comes into play. And we happen to have a very engaged community, and it's quite a large community that wants to get involved. And so, it's obvious that we then need to make sure we design a ranking system that like leverages that superpower we have. And so, unlike other benchmarking systems, we try to leverage the community and incentives to actually like incentivize that community to help us curate better the rank. So there's a couple ways that that can happen, and some of them are like happening now or being implemented now, and some of them are like kind of on the roadmap in the next few phases of recall. So the thing that's happening now is that the community is voting on agents that participate in our trading competitions, and they're supposed to be voting in a way where they're like, I anticipate that this agent will perform well at this particular task, P&L, 7-day P&L. And they are putting some weighting behind that in order to sort of like indicate this is the one to watch. This is the one to keep an eye on. And then they get, rewarded afterwards for doing that curation activity. The reason you would get rewarded for doing that sort of thing is because you did provide, from like real like sciencey nerd perspective, you provided new information that the protocol did not have ahead of time in many cases, right? Like a new agent comes along and like you have firsthand knowledge of like an experience with it or whatever. So you're like, yeah, this one's going to do well. I know ahead of time. So you're providing new information. And then eventually, like if everybody just starts like glomming on to like the same agent, that's not really providing new information. So that's less useful for the network. And I'll talk about ways we can, handle that later. But that's the idea, right? We want the community ecosystem to insert new information into this market, basically. And then you should get the incentive. There should be an incentive there. You should be rewarded for doing good work. So far, we've had really specific competitions. In future versions, we will also be like we did with that predict experiment, where we said like what skills should be measured and how should we measure those skills. We're going to continue to do that more and more in different contexts, so that there's also an incentive to help us decide what to measure, right? Like, are M dashes important? Are I don't know, is the ability to like give bad news in a friendly way important? Like, you tell me, right? Like let's figure that out together. What are important? And you may have heard us talk about skill pools in this context before for people listening. So that's that idea that like the community comes and suggests what we should measure. And then with that same experiment, we said, like, how should we measure these things? What are the evals that we should be using to measure empathy, or whether you can, do two-step like workflows, or whether you're going to actually not use M dashes when I ask you not to use M dashes. How do we measure that? Well, the community can help us with that as well. And then the final step of that sort of play is like, oh, okay, well, you helped us figure out what to measure. You helped us figure out how to measure it. Now, did they do it correctly? And then this is where some of these incentives start to play in. The last piece that I want to talk about there is, okay, if you're adding information to the network, what you are effectively doing, and this is going to go right into our next section, is you are reducing the uncertainty that we have in our measurement metrics, right? Because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is get a sense of like how good a particular AI entity as it is at a particular thing. How good is it at not using M dashes when we ask it not to use M dashes, right? And that's like kind of a weird question to ask even. Like, Derek, are you 7 good at not using M dashes in your writing? Like, that's a very strange
at least an 8
thing.
or a 9.
Yeah.
Or
like,
to
what
put
does it
it
even mean?
like another way of saying what Carson's saying is that when you have like a new competitor enter the scene, back in Web 2, PageRank, like Google's watching like how long you spend on a page and using that as a proxy for like whether you found the thing you were looking for and updating its algorithm accordingly. Oh, okay, this is a useful site for people. So in our context, when somebody new comes to the scene, like for example in our competitions, at that very first moment, nobody knows how good they are at what they do unless you've heard through the grapevine. So what can we do before running this evolving benchmark to be able to increase certainty even at that day one moment?
Ask the people. So basically, by providing more information to the network, we can like kind of decrease the uncertainty that we have about how good an agent is at a thing. Cool. This brings us to this section. So here's where we're going to get to the algorithm stuff. So recall rank is kind of based on measuring things across 2 axes. Hmm? Hmm. I wish I could actually put my hand on
Yeah,
the top of the
I know.
thing,
I'll
but
get that for next stream. We'll do like a green screen.
yeah. Anyway, so we've got it here, and so we've got like the actual raw performance scale here, which is just like, are you good at the
Are you
thing
good?
specifically? Are you
Specifically
good?
good compared to everybody else who's trying.
Yes. So that's what, so I was being a little tongue in cheek when I was like, are you 7 good at like not using M dashes? Like that doesn't make any
Are you
sense.
7th place good?
Yeah, stuff like that makes more sense. Are you gooder than another agent or person at not using M dashes? That's what I want to know, because that's how we sort of like rank and measure things. So it's like your skill relative to other things. And then on the uncertainty scale, it's like, okay, if I think you're sort of ranked about here, how certain am I that you're actually ranked there, or like maybe you just got lucky that one time and you really should be ranked here, because so anyway, we'll get to that in a second, but the idea is you have some like latent underlying skill level for a thing. An AI model does. An AI model has this like underlying latent skill at not using M dashes when asked not to use M dashes. I'm using this one because it's silly and easy to think about.
Yeah.
But there's some uncertainty around that. Like I know it's got some latent skill, but I don't quite know what it is. But if it does this a bunch of times, if it competes a bunch of times at trading or at like not producing M dashes, and we score it over time, that uncertainty starts to narrow in on what its true ranking should be along this axis. So we start to like really scale in on that. Now, what happens if, say, someone comes in, they like boost to the top of the leaderboard, they do so great, and then they're just like, well, I'm the best now and I'm just going to stop, right? Well, we already know that like other agents are out there like learning, improving, and the models are getting better over time. And so what will end up happening is those ones will keep competing. This one will stop competing, and our uncertainty starts to go back up again, because now we're not sure anymore relative to other competitors how good it is at, like, if it really does rank first, second, third, whatever. So we've got this like sort of like way to fine tune and understand what its latent score is over time. If it stops competing, we start to lose that certainty. So that's fine. We can capture that. What's a bit of a bummer is if, say, some new agent comes in and it's really good at a particular skill, but has never competed before, how do we like get a better sense of where it should actually rank? Again, we ask the people, and they can basically try to back that agent literally through like voting and staking. And then that also influences the uncertainty, but it never influences their score. So that's the thing I wanted to make. It's like the only way to move this way on the axis is just be better. Sorry, just be better. And then the only way to move in this axis is compete more or get more of the community to back your skills. And so we combine these things together to produce something that we're calling recall rank. That's pretty cool. How do we do the actual mathy bits? Let's scroll down a little bit. Oh, I kind of already preempted some of this stuff about measuring uncertainty and stuff. So anyway, so we use a particular model. We can dive into some details here. It might get too nerdy. I don't know. But we use a particular scoring model that's very similar to other things, but I want to say where it comes from. So the original kind of like scoring thing that a lot of people maybe know about is ELO scores from chess. And it's basically a way to measure like how good someone is relative to everybody else across like when this concept of like a latent skill level is involved. So it's like you're not 7, like it doesn't make sense to say you're 7 good at chess. It does make sense to say you're like better at chess than, you know, some particular famous chess person who I can't think of
You
right
got
now.
nothing. You can't
I got
even
nothing. I was really
one.
just give me one. Come on.
Magnus Carlsen. Yeah.
There. Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah.
So I'm probably like pretty close to as good at chess as the world's top chess players. No, that's definitely not true. I am terrible at chess. So my score would be like the default score, and their score would be way up here. And so it doesn't matter like what those things are, they're just relative metrics, but we have a way to measure that. Another context where this is useful is in like online gaming. If people like play Halo, these like giant Halo tournaments and things like that, you often want to know, like you can form these teams and compete against other teams. And it's useful to be able to rank and score not only the individuals on the team, but also the team itself. So like if you combine these players together, they're like expected to win or lose, and we can anyway.
Classic
so there's like tons of really
and the nuance of like how do we update those scores if, you know, red team wins versus blue team? Can we identify the contribution relative from player 1, 2, and 3 so that if somebody carried, they get more of a boost compared to everyone else who like almost threw?
Totally. Yeah. And so we want to be able to measure all those things. And so there's like specific models, scoring models that have been developed to address that. I love it when like really cool math comes out to solve like a fun gaming problem, right? You're like, I just want to play online with a bunch of buddies and like see who's better, whose teams are better. And then some mathematician's like, yeah, okay, cool. I'll invent a new math for you. Cool.
Yeah.
Like I love that. And so that's kind of, we leverage one of those scoring systems, which is called Placket Loose. So if you want to Google that or someone wants to look it up, you can do that. This is, it's like an extension of a Bradley Terry model to the multi-competitor scenario, which is what we have on Recall Rank, where we're doing multiple competitors. It's talked about really well in this paper. Naturally, everyone will just want to read this very dense scientific paper. I assume you all read these on your weekends. That's
Hey,
what we do here.
you had me at online ranking with multiple players. Like this is what I care about.
So that's what we use, and we can come back to this in a second. But it's an extension of another model called the Bradley Terry model, and this is one that a lot of other folks use. And that's designed specifically for pairwise comparisons. So if you've ever played around with like LM Arena, they use a modified Bradley Terry model.
Head to head.
Yeah, where you're doing head to head stuff. And that's a good model, but there's like a couple of reasons why it doesn't quite fit what we need to be able to solve for. One, it's actually quite computationally expensive to do. So if you want to start doing things like on-chain or in a Web3 context, that's a little harder. Two, it's designed specifically for head-to-head. And so and so is like ELO scores as well. So when you're trying to compare like a bunch of agents that are all trading, it doesn't quite work. You can kind of artificially do that by creating like artificial one-on-one head-to-head things and then like doing them all against each other. And that's how you create a score for a bunch of players playing. Or you could just use a metric that's designed specifically for multi-competitor scenarios. And so that's what Placket Loose is designed for. It also has a really efficient update algorithm. I'm not going to go into the details of that, but if you're like a Bayesian math geek, you might like that. And the Placket Loose one, the other reason we quite like it is because it is explicitly designed to capture a latent score and a uncertainty about that score. It's literally the thing that we kind of like want to capture is these two things. And so we call them mu and sigma. We track those two things kind of separately within the system. And then we take those two things, your like latent score and the uncertainty about that score, and we calculate your overall recall rank. And to calculate the recall rank, I'm going to like drastically simplify. It's actually a little bit more complicated than this, and we will release the algorithms, the exact algorithms that we use to do this at some point. But for the purposes of a live stream, basically we take your latent score and we take your uncertainty about that latent score, and we kind of like just subtract the uncertainty from your score, and we do that for everybody, and then we rank them. That's the simplest way to think about it.
Strong start.
And
So that way, if somebody
uncertainty,
has a really high score but really high uncertainty, they're not at the top of the board compared to somebody with that same score but low certainty.
yes. Now imagine this scenario. You're ranked, or you've got, I don't know, some scores here. Like this is A, this is B, right? And we've got lots of uncertainty about this score, but we're really certain about this one. When we subtract it out, like we get this, right? So then we're like, oh yeah, this one we know, we feel strongly about it. This one less so. The other scenario is both they have the same amount of uncertainty, but the community is telling us that this one is better. When we subtract them out, the uncertainty so we're reducing the uncertainty because the community has told us this, then this is what we get in terms of ranking. And if the community comes and says, oh, they're both competed just as many times, but this one is actually better, then we might actually rank them this way.
And to be clear, is the only form of signal someone can contribute endorsement. There's no such thing as like, I am confident this is a bad performer.
Not at the moment. That's a good question, actually. Yeah, that would be like sort of imply that there are like two sides to the market, if you want to call it a market. Not at the moment. You can't like downvote someone.
To go back to our
good vibes only
thing here, it's like we start with, let's imagine no one's endorsing you. That's a huge spread. And for the same skill, if there was endorsement, you could see a narrowing. In other words, there's no such thing as widening. We're already at max unknown, but there's a narrowing.
Yeah. And so it kind of makes sense if you think about it in terms of adding information to the system. Like by adding information to the system, the only thing you can do is like increase certainty or decrease uncertainty. So we can't kind of go the opposite. We can't take information out, basically, in that sense. So yeah, that's sort of how it works. And there's some more details to like how we actually calculate the rank and rank them. We do it in such a way that so again, this is some Bayesian crazy math stuff, but when we calculate the final rank, which is called your ordinal ranking.
Ordinal just meaning like order.
Order, yeah, exactly. We do it in such a way that, like, statistically speaking, we are 99.7% confident that the AI's true skill at that particular, or true score at that particular skill is at least this high or higher. right? Because there's some uncertainty. We don't know for certain. So you're like, if your latent score is like, I don't know, here and mine is here, we can compare those two things and we are 99% certain that your score is at least here and mine is at least here. But like there's some possibility always that like your score is a little bit higher, but not lower.
Specifically because of the subtracting choice we've made for now.
Yes. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, we can go into some more details about like how this is computed and how you can even start to treat these scores as like teams. Like, so one model might actually be like a team of different skills. You can do all sorts of really cool stuff once you have this like core scoring mechanism in place, but we can go into some details about that later. Another really good question I see over here, all these models and data like this Bradley Terry model, there's links included in the doc, in the X doc. So follow those links, but we didn't want to like get people bogged down in all of the details. I think I wrote an original version of this blog post that was like full of math, and then basically Michael was like, yeah, no one's gonna read the math, and I was like, someone will, you will. So maybe we'll put some math stuff out for people who might want to, but for sure there's like good links in here. There's a link right there.
Yeah, hot fix coming soon for people that are like, why can't I read the links? It was just a CSS problem, so I apologize for our dark links.
Yeah. Anyway,
yeah. I have a question for you. There's a graph we haven't really touched on. It might be a great place to finish this out, just to paint a little picture of where we're going and the role people play in this ecosystem we're designing.
Oh yeah.
Do you want to touch this? If so, I'll make it bigger and easier for us to point at.
Yeah, I mean, this is a conceptual diagram, but I think it's like useful to tell the overall story, so we could dive in there. And then we should, before we close out, we'll jump down to the like calls to actions so people can see kind of.
Okay. So we'll do this one just to get people a little excited.
And then yeah. Okay. So
do it like this.
Oh, rad! This is so cool. Boy, I like this platform, DevRel Derek. This is great. Okay, so now it's up here, and we've got a kind of like quadrant here of like define, compete, curate, and discover, and all these things play together to create recall rank and our like ranking protocol. So the way that it will work as we sort of like roll all this out is that the community is basically like governing how and what we measure, right? So the community will define and design the types of competitions and the types of skills and how we measure those things and how we should allocate rewards to those things by getting involved. And that's through staking. So they can actually stake and participate and then potentially earn from their work because they're doing work for the network. If you do work for someone, you should probably be rewarded for that work in some way. That seems like a fair trade-off. Then we have the actual like individual models, agent builders, teams, whomever, who will actually compete in these like seasons of competitions on the specific skills defined by the community, and they must also stake to participate in that, and then they can earn. There's also scenarios where like someone might actually like like compete something that they didn't do, like so bring in like something that's happening in the real world and calculate some ranking and scoring for it. More on that later because it's going to be really cool. But there's ways so that you don't necessarily need to be like an agent developer per se to like introduce something into the system. Okay, that was very vague, but it'll become clear later.
I didn't know what you meant.
And then we've got this curate, which is like, okay, you told us what to measure, how to measure, and how to dish out rewards. Then we went and we did that thing and we measured it. And now it's your turn to help us curate those results. And you got to stake and you can potentially earn for doing that too. And then all of this stuff is building up this like giant corpus of valuable data, this agent rank index, right? That then users can use or other developers can use, or other ecosystems can use to like help drive discovery and understanding really who are the best, what is the best thing for this particular skill I'm interested in. And that's so that ties us back, maybe so we could zoom out, I guess. That ties us back to maybe the like PageRank analogy, if you will, which is like, okay, you've decided what you're going to measure and how you're going to measure it. You measure it, you collect up this corpus of data. Like now let's build a whole new ecosystem and industry around that thing that you've measured. Like the web runs on PageRank, you know, in a lot of, or at least the ads of the yester web run on PageRank. And so now we start to actually like leverage that asset to the rest of the world. Yeah, so there you go. We're going to do it. And so this is just a sort of some calls to action for the community to get involved and help us like curate and build this amazing thing together. It's going to be rad. It's going to be fun. You should have a say in this crazy future internet that we're moving towards. Don't you think? I think everybody should have a say. I talk to some people every now and then who are like, I'm a little worried about like AI and the direction it's headed. Is it going to be good for everybody? And my answer to that is like that. I don't know, maybe, hopefully. But I know for certain that if you don't get involved, then you just don't get to complain about it if it doesn't go the way that you want, you know? So if you want to have a say in the future direction of the internet, Recall is a really great way, I think, to help do that together. But either way, you should just get involved in some way that you can and however you can. The way that I'm getting involved is by working, at Recall Labs on Recall the network. But then the way DevRel Derek gets involved is in like educating people and helping people understand how all of this works. But either way, I'd love to see people get involved. Yeah, like so many good ideas just popping up on the screen right here. Yes, the answer is yes. There are moves to arrange competitions for different skills apart from trading competitions. Yes. Check out some of the first things that we did that Andrew and Derek talked about earlier in the week, about the predict and the recall model arena stuff. There's some great examples of empathy tests and the M-dash tests and all that stuff. It's there. And we're doing
Which, for those who don't know, you could just scan this QR code. That's just a link to this blog. On the same blog is another article, the one that Carson's referring to that Andrew and I just looked at, which was going into the results from the model head-to-heads on all these different skills, such as empathy. Bradley told me. Yeah. Well, thank you, Carson. Thank you to everyone who's watching. Also, we've got a massive, excited community. Join us in Discord if you want to get into it a little bit more. I'm really responsive there. If you have suggestions of ways we could implement this, skills we should test, models we should take a look at, if you're working on an AI agent, or if you're interested in working on an AI agent, I'm your guy. I'm here to help you bring that idea to life. And basically, we literally couldn't do this without everyone's participation. So thank you to the thousands of people that have already been submitting skills, submitting evals, making agents competing in the trading competitions. We appreciate all of you, and we can't do this without you.
Well, we could, but it'd be less fun.
Honestly. And we would just be like streaming to nobody, and like nobody would use the thing. So
yeah, this has been really fun, Derek. I hope we get to do this again. I like nerding out with you. It was fun. If any of our viewers want more of this stuff or less, I guess I would be okay to hearing that too.
Yeah, please let us know either way. Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Well, until next time, thank you for joining me, CTO Carson, and we'll see you all on the internet. Bye-bye.
Sweet.